Let's establish the parts of the fraction first. So the number at the top is called your numerator, and the number at the bottom is called your denominator. An easy way for you to remember this is the number at the top is called a numerator, starts with n for normal numbers, because all normal numbers are actually on top and they're just over 1. And the lower number is called a denominator and starts with d. So you'll never forget that the denominator, which starts with d, stands for down, is the lower number, and then your numerator is your top number. The reason I said normal numbers are usually over 1, because let's take the number 5. You just write it as 5, but really it's over an invisible 1, because any number divided by 1 is going to give you itself, which is why any normal number is considered to be over an invisible 1. Now, when dealing with fractions, anytime you're adding or subtracting a fraction, you must have a common denominator to do so. So let's take the operation 1 over 2 plus 3 over 10. Anytime you're adding or subtracting the fraction, you need to have the common denominator, and so that's the number at the bottom. Once you have the common denominator, you simply do the operation for the numerators, and then your denominator stays constant. So in this case, our common denominator can be 10, because we know that 2 times 5 is going to give me 10. And what you do to the denominator, you're going to also do to the numerator. So we're going to multiply both by 5, and then we're going to have 5 over 10 plus 3 over 10. Our denominator remains constant. And then you solve your operation for the numerators, 5 plus 3, that's 8. You can leave it as is, or sometimes part of the problem asks you to reduce the fraction to its lowest form, and you do so by dividing the numerator and denominator by the same number or same factor. We know that both can be divided by 2, so 8 divided by 2 is going to give me a 4, and 10 divided by 2 is going to give me a 5. We need to have a common denominator, in which case we can multiply the 5 by 2 to get 10. So you do the same to the denominator and the numerator as well. And that's going to give us the 5 over 10. Minus 1 times 2 is going to give me 2, and the 5 times 2 is going to give me 10. Now that we have the common denominator, you'll simply solve the numerators and keep the denominator constant. So the 10 remains, and then the 5 minus 2 is going to give you the 3. And that is your final answer. You can't reduce it any further because 10 cannot be divided by 3 and 3 cannot be divided by 2. And that's just the simplest way of checking whether or not you can reduce your fraction. For multiplication and division, unlike the addition and subtraction, you actually do not need to have a common denominator, which makes things a lot easier. So if we have the 1 over 2 times 3 over 10, we do not need a common denominator, and the denominator does not remain constant once you solve the problem. In fact, what you do is you multiply the numerators, so 1 times 3 is 3, and you have to also multiply the denominators. So the 2 times 10 is going to give you 20. The division of fractions is a little different, but still easy. So take our equation, 3 over 9 divided by 1 over 2. You leave the first fraction as is, and you flip the second and you flip the sign. So what does that mean? So I have the 3 over 9. Your first fraction remains the same. You flip the sign to a multiplication, and you flip your second fraction. So you switch out the numerator and the denominator. So the 3 over 9 remains. The division becomes multiplication. The numerator and the denominator also get switched, so it becomes 2 over 1. And then now you have a multiplication of fractions, and we do that by multiplying the numerators. So 3 times 2, that's 6. And multiplying the denominators, 9 times 1 is 9. And that's how you get your final answer. So just remember, you switch the sign to a multiplication, and you switch the numerator and the denominator of the second fraction. And you solve as if you're solving a normal multiplication equation. Hope you enjoyed this video on fractions. I'm going to try and keep the information concise and simple in my videos. Please consider subscribing and sharing to help me develop content that is useful for you guys. If you have any topics you want me to prioritize, then please just leave them in the comments.